Thank you. Can you all hear me? Yeah. Okay, good. I want to thank the Department of Culturally Responsive Pedagogy and Instruction, first of all, for inviting me, Lorenzo and Rashonda for their work. It is an honor to be here. I am a little bit nervous for some reason because I am definitely far from a shy person. But I think that part of it is the simple fact that I get to be here as a mother who has a child in the Tucson Unified School District. So just me standing here is a privilege because it's not very often that parents whose children attend school systems get to talk to the district, right, in this fashion, in this manner. It's not often that mothers and parents are seen as a source of expertise in and of themselves, right? So Rashonda touched on it a little bit, just a little bit more. My code is Mother Bridge Interrupter Scholar, and I will just define that a little bit. Of course, I'm the mother of 3 natural children, Journey, Jayanti, and Zora, age 20 now, 18, and 10. Zora just graduated from 5th grade from Holiday Magnet Elementary School in TUSD. And she will be attending another TUSD school. She will be attending Utterback Middle School. So I believe in the promise of public education, but I will talk about that a little bit more because there's another side to that. But the premise is something that I believe in, and the fact that I was able to find the schools that I was able to find for my daughter when I moved here 2 years ago is part of that mother work, the investigation I had to do. And when I first started working at the University of Arizona, moving here from Phoenix, after moving from Flint, Michigan, you can ask me questions about the water crisis during the Q&A, please don't do it now. I was questioned by people like, why would you choose TUSD? And I'm in the Department of Education, right? Why would you choose this school? I lived in Sahuarita School District when I first moved out here. You're in a better school district. Why would you choose this? Because I think that the diverse voices that are present in this district, I think that the parental diversity and the diversity of your students is of value to me. It contributes. It's more than just the academics, A minus 2 equals 5 type stuff, right? So that is part of the mother work and the considerations that mothers all over this district have to consider and weigh out when they make these decisions. I'm a bridge. I occupy multiple spaces of privilege and not privilege, right? I am sometimes disabled. I'm a Black woman. I'm a single mother. Have been a single mother since I've been a mother of 3 children, but I'm also in this educational space. I work in academia. Right, I have access to things that a lot of people don't have access to. So I'm very interested in how I serve as a bridge between those gaps in privilege and opportunity to allow other people to cross over. I'm an interrupter because if I'm in the space and you say something crazy, I don't say something about it. No one's ever said, Dawn's quiet. She's so silent, she doesn't say much. No, that is not. If you say something in front of me, and it is unjust, or is based in deficit, or is based around stereotypes, it is my responsibility as a mother and as an educator to interrupt that, to interrupt where we have these barriers around all of the entire education system. And we will talk about that a little bit more. And a scholar. And scholar is last, not because it is the thing that I hold least value of. I wanted to get a PhD, and you'll know a little bit more about my story. It was like this high aspiration, and I thought it was unattainable. So I worked very hard to get it. But in this space, my status as a scholar is in service to those other 3 status. It's not the other way around. That I do this for those other things, and those other things are part of community. So that's a little bit more about me. That's 17-year-old me. Wasn't she cute? And that's my little baby sister, Nay. You too smart for your own good, is what they would tell me. Read books with no mirrors? That's how you get into college. That's how they propelled me. Be seen, not heard, but do this worksheet, is what they sell me. Credentials equal paper is how they compel me. She got too many issues though, and we can't deal. So guess what? They expel me. But in all my time in those concrete walls, what they could not do was hear me. And seeing no reflections of myself in that space, I believe that they too could not see me. So left fluttering in a world not built for paper dolls, it was open season on one so naive in the ways of false gods. The brilliance was always there. They just couldn't get close enough to see, unable to squint to see the strength through all that precarity. But luckily, there were those who saw the spark and nurtured the flame of what could be. I often think of those who were left behind and not as fortunate as me, without champions in the junkyard to find them and have faith in their possibility. There is absolutely nothing special about the story of Dawn. I was just fortunate enough to survive the sieve, and now I hope to bring others along. I remember my last day of regular school very clearly. I remember what I was wearing when my school counselor called me down to the office. He had tears in his eyes, and my school counselor, John Crouch, was pretty close with our family and had worked with my mother trying to pull me through and push me. And he sat me down and he said, "Dawn, there's nothing I can do about this, but you can't go here anymore." Mind you, most of my grades were C and above, but the district in Flint had put in place a policy that said that students that miss 20 or more days from a single class will automatically be held back. Now, I'm not saying I was an angel, because I wasn't. But the irony is that most days that I would skip school, not all, sometimes I went to the mall and sometimes I went to my boyfriend's house. I gotta keep it 100. But most days, I would walk across the street and go to the public library and stay in there for hours. And the security guards at the front doors of the library, who were not supposed to allow me in, would always let me come in, because they knew all I was going to do was sit at the back table and read. And I read all sorts of books. I read about Malcolm X. I read about James Baldwin. I read books by Toni Morrison, and I couldn't get enough. But I was not going to all my classes. And so when my counselor told me that I had to be put out, he might as well have walked me to the corner of Martin Luther King Street and Pearson Road and say, "Kid, have at it." Because I went to the alternative school for 1 week. 1 week. And I stayed, not because it was too hard. Absolutely not. When I sat down at the desk, they gave me a notebook of papers and worksheets and sat it down in front of me, and they said, "Work on that on your own." There was no instruction. There was no dialogue with any other students. I was just to sit at the desk and complete worksheets. And when I got those done, I would pass that part. This was a waste of my time. And so I walked out of that alternative ed and never came back. Not until I was 26 years old and I was pregnant with my daughter. And 8 months full of her, I sat down in the GED testing center in Denver, Colorado, Aurora to be exact. And I took that test, and they said I had one of the highest scores on a GED that the state had ever seen. I did not take classes. I literally just made up my mind that I wanted to go to college after I had my daughter. This was my firstborn child. And I knew that being a high school dropout was not the way to go. But again, this story of what I went through is not abnormal. There are plenty of geniuses that did not graduate from college. George Bernard Shaw, William Faulkner, both won Nobel Prizes in literature. Albert Einstein, so you don't think it's just about literature and English. We know that the bias that exists. He has a Nobel Prize in physics, but he too dropped out of high school, worked his way back into college on his own, and then became the Albert Einstein that we know today. The one thing I will say about those 3 Nobel Prize winners is they are all what? They are all white men. Now we can unpack about how people are selected for the Nobel Prize in another conference, right? But they did hold some privilege, especially at their time, when men could be successful, especially if they were white men, without a high school degree and definitely without a college degree. But imagine what this meant for women or people of color. Now bring it up to present day. What does not having those credentials mean for people who do not make it through high school? But to me, the deeper question is, why are so many people not making it through? In my own situation, it had nothing to do with ability. I would skip school all week and come in on Fridays to take the tests, literally take the test and walk back out. And my English teacher, Mrs. Ferlici, she just stopped saying anything. Mrs. Ferlici took the pictures for my wedding, another story. I'm no longer married. But that's how close we were. She just understood, like, Dawn's not doing this. But still, the district policy was that I was to be held back. There was no sense of what else can we do? Let's talk to her and find out what's going on in her household. Let's find out what's going on in her family. Let's find out if she's even living at home anymore. Let's find out if her father was still in the house or her family had been homeless for some time. Let's find these things out. But nope, they asked no questions. And the counselor was sitting there powerless because the system was not set up to intervene in a way that will be helpful and move me forward. Sir Ken Robinson has written multiple books about this type of phenomenon. Finding your element is like him going through and collecting stories of grown people who have been so successful in their life who did not finish school, many of who did not finish school, whether they dropped out of high school or college. To him, the answer is being more creative in schools, right? And I admire his work. I love his work. The work that I do grounds art and technology, art and all types of creative endeavors. But I think that there is something else. I had gotten a phone call for a scholarship before I moved to Arizona. And they were going to give me a scholarship for something, getting ready to go to ASU. And I remember the question they asked me on the phone, and I was having a bad day. I wasn't feeling very good. And they said, what makes you eligible to receive this scholarship? And I said, nothing, because there are 100 Dawns in Flint. I knew I had lost the scholarship. I didn't feel good. And to me, it was a stupid question. Because you had already asked me for all of this information and to write down all of my pain to show that I was somehow worthy of getting your money and your help. And then you're going to call me on the phone and ask me how I'm eligible. I am no better than anyone else who did not get saved in my situation. I just had angels who intervened in my life. The angels intervened because they were motivated by something. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more. But my experiences are why I'm in education. They are why I do the type of work I do in my scholarship. As Rashonda said, I am all about connecting academia with education systems, with communities, understanding the community cultural wealth that is inherent to all people, especially the people who are most often overlooked. I do work that seeks to capture the trauma and the struggle, but also the voice, the fight for inclusion, the fight for access and transformation in educational system by historically marginalized populations. So I seek to show and reveal the barriers, but also show the wins, because we are not just our pain. And that is insulting when people say that. That's why I downplay. Everyone wants to say, Dawn dropped out of high school and now she's a college professor. That's cool. But do you know why I am? Because I had so many people in my corner, and I've had a lot of wonderful things happen in my life that unfortunately everybody else didn't have. We are more than our pain. And I think when we tell this story of the education system and what we're in here, we are not, as an education system, very honest, and that's how people like me fall through and only by chance get picked up, because we have not. Henry Giroux said that we are pedagogically ignorant. Henry Giroux is an educational philosopher who followed the work of Paulo Freire, who I will talk about in a moment. Pedagogically ignorant. What does he mean by that? He means, so pedagogy is about how you do education, really. It's about your philosophy behind education and then how that's going to play out in your practice. But how many actually think about what education is for? As a country, I would suggest that we have become lost in the sauce about what education is for and have decided that it's for this very narrow purpose. If we decide that it's only for acquiring jobs, or it's only to be in service of the system, however we want to define the system, then what does that mean for the rest of the person? That is suggesting that children and their communities are just this one thing. Their potential for labor is where their value lies. And I would argue that it is about more than that. Mission statements of most school districts have these really flowery words about what it is they're about. But in my research and in my own experience as a mother, I read your words. I read what your mission statement says, how it's committed to children, and it's to make them whole human beings, and to make sure, they always add, I've never seen a school district not add, that can contribute some kind of way to the community or whatever. And to me, all I hear is labor. That's all I hear when I see that part. We want to make sure that you work well in whatever way that serves the system. But what about working well in a way that serves your community and serves yourself, right? That self-actualization in Maslow's hierarchy of needs that we talk about. So before you get there, you have to have like the basic framework. I will share a story, a couple stories from my actual research. I have a son named Jayanti. I'm not going to go through the whole thing of what happened to Jay, but he's my 18-year-old. And I got a phone call from his principal that he was being suspended from school. And I asked the principal, why is he being suspended? And he said for having drug paraphernalia and smoking on campus. And so you have to come and pick him up. He will be suspended for 10 days. Called me while I was in my office at the time as a student at ASU. So I printed off the code of conduct and I read it really quickly, and I rushed down to the office, and me and the principal went back and forth because I had read the code of conduct and I read that it said that especially if it's a first offense, that you do not have to go to 10-day suspension, and the principal looked shocked. How did she know that? Because I know how to read. And I know that in the code of conduct, and I know that TUSD is doing a remake of their code of conduct, that oftentimes there are little gems hidden in there, and that I know that many people know that parents will not read that whole boring thing. You're counting on it, except for I did. Because I had been trained and was doing research on a group of Black women who were grassroots organizers in the Phoenix community who went through and read code of conduct books with us, and so showed us the importance of reading this document. So by the time I went to go pick up Jay, I saw what was happening. I give Jay every form of punishment I can think of. This is from my journal at the time. He has dishes for 3 months. I take away his phone until I feel like you ready to have it back. Mama, when can I get my phone? When I feel like you having your phone. I take away his laptop. He is banished to his room for a month. I make him start running 2 miles every morning before school. Seriously. I preach to him 13 different versions of the same talk. You should not have done what you did. Peep how your little white friends were in the bathroom with you and they all got out. What about the boy who gave you this mess? But only you stuck holding the bag, Jay. That is the society we live in. You cannot make those type of mistakes because they waiting to gobble you up whole, waiting for you to come out of the stall, watching to put you out of school. You cannot afford bad decisions. This can cost you everything. I am sure I sounded like a mad woman to him. I just desperately needed him to understand that my 15-year-old child can't be a kid anymore. It felt like a psychologically abusive, developmentally inappropriate, yet sadistically necessary conversation. This incident happened in December. On February 23rd, Ahmaud Arbery was murdered while taking a jog. On February 24th, I start getting up in the morning to follow Jay in my car as he does his punishment jog. Jay later told me that he believed I was following him in my car to make sure he ran the assigned distance. I wish it were so light. On February 28th, I received an notice to appear for the court. I was led to believe that he would not go to court and instead attend a class on campus in school. I take Jay with me to the next ACBM meeting. ACBM is the group of mother organizers that I was doing research on. I take the letter that I had gotten from Superior Court and the paperwork detailing Jay's suspension back in December. After the meeting, once the members leave, Mrs. Dotson asked me and Jay to sit down at the table where Mrs. Thames joins us. I give them the paperwork outlining the incident, Jay's suspension, and the letter informing me of the meeting with the probation officer. They write down some notes as they are reading through everything, and then Ms. Dotson asked me, "Why didn't you tell us about this whole situation back in December?" I tell her I thought I could handle it, but in my head, I added I was ashamed, I was embarrassed. Even with these women who I knew would not judge me and had seen it all before, but fear superseded all pride when I recognized that these folks were really trying to put my son in the judicial system. "Don't ever do that again," Mrs. Thames said. She told me about the things that I should look for and that I need to get a police report. It had never struck me that there would be a police report, and this is the police report that is up before you. She said, if they have the charges listed on this paper and have assigned him a probation officer, there is a police report. They also offer to pay the $50 fee that I was told by the court I have to pay for Jay to participate in the diversion program. They give Jay a good talking to, a gentler version of the same talk I had given him multiple times. In the last 3 months, they hug us both and we leave. When we get home, I go to my bedroom and I cry. The day of the meeting arrives. We go to the juvenile detention center in silence, and I keep looking over at Jay while I was driving. He had on khaki shorts and a dark gray polo. His untamed hair was saying what he couldn't. His knobby knees caught my attention, and I decided to use that to make small talk. "Did you put lotion on, honey?" Yeah, Nana brought me some." Thinking of his sensitive, eczema-prone skin that he has dealt with since he was a baby, I add, "I need to get you some more Eucerin," and he agrees. Another long hallway of silence. I tap his knee, my voice shaking. Mama just scared for you, okay, honey?" My eyes well up, and Jay grabs my hand. "I know, Mama." More silence as I continue to drive. After a couple of minutes, Jay notes as I wipe tears from my eyes, "But Mama, keep your hands on the steering wheel so we can be safe." We both bust out laughing. Jay had successfully broken the tension until I pulled up to the detention center parking lot, and we both silently go in. We head into the building where security takes my purse. We go through the metal detectors. I go upstairs, and while we are waiting, what seems like the heaviness of the situation drapes itself over Jay Auntie's back. He set his head down on the table as we wait to be called in. We are eventually called in to see Officer Jody. She makes clear that Jay must complete all of the steps in the diversion program to avoid being sent before a judge and a potential trial. The plan includes the following steps: weekly drug testing, complete an 8-hour drug education class at the detention center, write an essay on life goals, attend 5 12-step meetings with adults, mind you, with adults who are in 12-step meetings. And I had to complete a parenting class because, you know, I must need a parenting class. During this time, if he does anything wrong, all bets are off and he will be sent before the judge. Now, when I was doing my research for my dissertation, it just so happens that this happened to my son while I was working with a group of Black mothers who were working to fight the school-to-prison pipeline and change educational policy. At the same time, I met another mother. Did you all get my 2 articles? Did they get the 2 articles? Okay. So one of the articles, I will tell you very quickly, is the story of a mother that we will call Michelle and her son expulsion from school when he was 12 because the teacher said she was scared of him because he cried in the hallway. Then the school district went to go add documents to his electronic file suggesting that he looked up bomb making on his school computer. But he literally wasn't at the school during the time because he had already been expelled, waiting for the hearing. The ACBM pointed this out, that he could not have been at the school at this time, and the school district ignored that, and they just pulled it out of the file and said, oh, well, we won't look at that. Ultimately, the mother, Michelle, ended up pulling her son out of the district and sent her son literally to another state. She sent him to Florida. She sent her son to Florida with his father because she was scared of what was happening here. This mother worked with ACBM, so she had seen multiple incidences and stories like my story and like her story of students, Black and brown students, being put out of school for age developmentally expected behavior and over punishment for incidences, especially nonviolent offenses, for offenses like willful defiance or disrespect, right? This is a post that Michelle sent with me. One of the things, her son had tested into gifted programs in the district that he had been in before the district that he got expelled. Yet the district refused to put him in the gifted program. And she told me the story, you know, as researchers, we interview people. I had multiple interviews with all of these mothers. And she sent me, when she found this Facebook tag, she said, I can't find the paperwork saying that he was in gifted programs. And she kept like trying to convince me. And I was like, I believe you, Michelle. I believe you. But she found it on Facebook and she tagged me on it, which just goes to show how much these mothers were used to not being believed, right? How we don't believe what they say about their children, about their prowess, about their greatness, about their gifts. I use artwork in my research. So this is a poem, and when I say artwork, I define it very broadly. It's visual arts, it's dance, it's storytelling, it's poetry. And this is Michelle's poem after she sent her son away to Florida. Murder is the charge. Murder is the charge. Why so large? I know you're thinking, but let me tell you about the life that's missing. Full of passion, but she didn't like the reaction. She said she was scared of my son, her fear, so they tried to suspend him for the whole year. He's never been the same, his glow is gone, but I know who to blame, and it wasn't the broken home. She was the teacher, also Caucasian, my son a Black boy with passion, but they say race is not in the equation. Yes, I said his color, nothing he can change, so as his mother, the Black mothers, we took a stand to tell the school district they can't have another Black child, Black student, Black brother, all because she feared him and he did not fear her. He now hates what he sees in the mirror. She killed his love for self and his love for school. This has never been about him breaking the rule. When it comes to our black boys, killing their passion is not small but large. So I rest my case with murder is the charge. I just want to say that this story does end well because just this year her son graduated from high school with top honors like high GPA and will be going to college. When we see these type of stories, me, my son, who I ended up finishing out his high school year, homeschooling him, Michelle's son, we have to really start interrogating the educational system and looking at what is missing. Racially relevant, culturally relevant pedagogy is one such intervention for the things that are missing. So yes, I believe in creativity, but when you start to study culturally relevant pedagogy, especially when you go back to the roots of it. So Gloria Ladson-Billings is largely credited with this theorization that has been used in school districts, but she was highly influenced by other folks. This is some of the mothers' artwork that they created when I was working with them. She said the purposes of culturally relevant teaching are to empower students intellectually, socially, emotionally, and politically by using cultural references to impart knowledge, skills, and attitudes. I think people get lost because all they hear is culture, and so they think that it means, oh, we're just gonna have African dance and do some African artwork or some, Latinx artwork or have like a Mexican fest, and now we're culturally relevant, and that's how you do it. I think you have to read more than that. Gloria Ladson-Billings was influenced largely by this man here. I appreciate people know who he is. I'm going to assume that most of you should, because when I went through teacher education in Michigan, when I started my program, this was required reading. But that was many years ago, relatively speaking. As soon as 2012, this book was banned in Tucson. And so I want to look a little bit more deeply about why someone like Paulo Freire would be banned. And what are some of the things that he was talking about? What are some of the things that he was advocating? He was born in Brazil. He became an educator and a philosopher, largely working with adults who could not read. And so in doing his work with these adults who were farmers, right, who were poor, he came to understand that literacy, how we narrowly defined it, is a broader concept. They say that Paulo Freire was a scholar not just of the word, W-O-R-D, but of the world, W-O-R-L-D. He used information that was relevant and the knowledge that was coming from the farmers himself. He had humility when he was teaching these individuals how to read, because he wanted them to be literate, not just I can read the word, but I can understand the word, I can comprehend the word, and I can extend it to what it is that's happening in my own community. And we are trying to do something like that. That is a very dangerous thing to systems of power, to the status quo. His book was also banned in South Africa during apartheid, in parts of Latin America that had military regimes, and I think that as the United States, we should feel shame to be in the same boat as these same places. Part of his practice was engaging in cultural circles where he would delve into topics, not just topics, but words, right? He would take words and break them down and go into the root of words. And it was very easy to do with Portuguese. It's harder to do with English because of how English is constructed, whole nother conversation. But in these culture circles, they would have conversations and they would come to some realizations and they would teach him things, because Freire was not born poor. He did go through poverty. So he was steadily learning as well. This was not where he came from, but he did go through that poverty during the Great Depression like many people did. But he understood that I am getting knowledge from them just like they are getting knowledge from me. And if you read the book, one of the main things that people talk about is the banking system, what he calls the banking system of education, that unfortunately many of us still utilize in most classrooms, that we think we're just going to feed students information and they just memorize it and they regurgitate it at our call. And Freire was not about that. He said that is not how education should go. Education, the educational process, the process of educating, should be grounded in some things that make the educational process deeper for us and that have an actual, real, contextual impact on the students' lives. Paulo Freire spoke often of love, especially and specifically radical love, as the precept of connecting and engaging with students so they can acquire critical consciousness. Critical consciousness, this ability to break down what's happening around you, think about it, and say what's right or what's wrong about it, what ways you want to transform it, what ways you want to change it. Not just, I'm memorizing some things, I'm not going to think deeply about it. We live in a society where we don't want people to be critical about anything they consume, we just want them to consume it. Instead of interrogating, investigating, and pushing, and questioning, and speaking and having dialogue. Freire was all about dialogue. But to have that dialogue, there were some skills that you needed to have that he went on about. One of them was humility, which again, we will go into that a little bit later. So, Paulo talked about radical love. And some scholars have said that he was literally in love himself. So that's why love was kind of the center of what he was involved in. But I would say that it's not just that he understood, because Paulo Freire was considered an activist as well, not just an academic, not just a scholar, not just an educator, but an activist because he loved the people. And so how do you engage in this type of radical love in a culture of fear? And I would say that back then he was inside of a culture of fear. Freire was imprisoned for 70 days because the new government that was put in place considered him to be subversive. After he was let out of prison, he went into exile and he did not go back to his home of Chile for almost 20 years because they considered him so dangerous for teaching people how to think critically. So the idea that fear is always present. I think as educators, when most people, you ask a teacher, like, why are you a teacher? They're like, 'cause I love students. I love the kids. Well, you may love the kids, but there's something else in this space. It's not just this love, but it is also fear. And so Fisher is a scholar who wanted to push back on our perceived notions of fear and love as dichotomous, as being two ends of a separate pole, two ends of the same pole. But Fisher suggests that actually they work in concert with each other and they cannot be separated. So when you say you love somebody, it's like marriage. And you go up and you get married and they say through sickness and health, death. Nobody thinks about the sickness part. Nobody thinks about the death part, not for real. Through richer or poor, nobody thinks about the poor part. You're just thinking about love. I'm going to focus on the love. But is that really love if you have not imagined the worst possible situation and you still being by that person, right? So Fisher says that we need to look at both love and fear. And he says that fear is constantly present, especially now. We live in a culture of fear. We have legislation that says if you teach certain ways or teach certain topics or you don't say the right thing, you could be arrested, you could be fined. In different states, different consequences. So we are surrounded by fear. We also have fear of whether or not we're going to lose our jobs, fear of whether or not the students are going to fight us, fear of our parents, but ultimately it's fear of each other. It's fear of each other. And people are taking advantage of that fear. But we have to push back on that and utilize the fear. Be honest about it. Be honest about the fear that's in the room. And when people don't know about other people, they have fear. But you have to be honest to go and investigate, to go on deeper with how is it that I get to love through the fear. without it being based in stereotypes and bias and all these sorts of things. So how does radical love survive in an environment of fear? Well, the first thing is through critical reflection. Freire says, it so happens that to every understanding, sooner or later, an action corresponds. Once man, and excuse his, terminology, but this was like 19 whatever. Once man perceives a challenge, understands it, and recognizes the possibilities of response, he acts. The nature of that action corresponds to the nature of his understanding. Pretty much what he is saying is the more you are actually critical and you come to understand things, how can you understand something and not move on it? Once you know a thing, you cannot unknow the thing. And if you decide after you know the thing not to take action on the thing, you are being irresponsible at the least and possibly hateful. Once you know that there is something wrong, if you actually have love, you take action to correct the wrong. He says reflection plus action equals praxis, and that is what should inform our classrooms. We should think every day about what it is I did well, what it is I did wrong, how this student responded, why are they responding like that? How did I respond? How did it make me feel? Why am I feeling like this? And then move to action to fix or improve or to do those things again. If you're like, I had a really awesome day, that was wonderful, the thing that I did. And spread the word. I'm going to tell this other teacher about this thing I did. Maybe it can help them. Of humility, that you need humility to fight the fear or to deal with the fear. The banking assumption, the banking method of teaching assumes intellectual superiority. So we assume that teachers know everything. But how do you know everything, especially about a community that you're not from? And when we talk about culture, it's not just race. We have to go beyond that. I have a different culture in my household than you have in yours, and that's my house, right? So culture is all over the place. I'm not a fan of the term cultural competency because I don't think anyone definitely cannot be an expert on culture. No one's an expert. And I don't think we can even reach competency, which really is kind of like mediocrity. Like, I'm competent. Do you want your doctor to be competent? I don't. I'm a competent doc. I'll deliver your baby. Wait, what? Instead, I use the terminology cultural cognizance. And it is the idea that there is an awareness that everybody has a different culture, and inherent in being cognizant of something is that through your humility that you can learn more. We can always learn more. Not only that, is that culture is not stagnant. It is forever changing. Situations are changing. Your students' culture in their classrooms are changing. They could have one situation and then mom and dad are taken away, or brother or sister died, or they lost their house. The culture in their home is going to change because the parents and the people in charge or the family has to respond differently. And so you have to always be open to knowing that you can learn something else and you don't know everything that there is to know. There has to be a commitment. Gloria Ladson Billings, in her book Dream Keepers, how many have read Dream Keepers? Again, a book I'm assuming that most teachers have read. Okay. If you haven't read it, read it. It really is the root of her culturally relevant pedagogy, is this book that she wrote in 1994. She talks at the end, or near the end, because it's not a long book. I raise these points not to attempt to absolve parents of their responsibility towards their children's education, but to encourage teachers to look more broadly and carefully at the causes of the behavior that they see, to develop multiple perspectives, and to make the commitment of working with their students regardless, let me say that again, regardless of parental participation or lack thereof. You are not in this job, in education, to then put it on the parents. Yes, there are incompetent parents, but may I add that sometimes we are all incompetent. I'm a mama of 3 kids. Sometimes I slip. Sometimes I don't have everything. You know what I love? I'm gonna shout out to Holiday a little bit. You know what I love? Is I felt like I was partnered with the teachers. I knew I could call them. I knew they would call me if my child was having a bad day and say, oh, Zora was a little bit down in class today. What's going on? Do you need anything? That is a collaborative partnership. right? Because all parents don't have it together. It is a world, it is a global, it is a family collaborative thing, and parents have to be able to trust you in that collaboration. And we have to have a commitment to helping parents trust us. Courage. It is easy to hide in the corners, to remain unseen and unbothered in our classrooms or schools. Yet, the educator employing radical love ethic would necessarily seek ways to make a way for their children, as their own well-being is spiritually tied to that of their students and their students' communities. Freire said, love is an act of courage, not fear, a commitment to others and to the cause of, of liberation. How does courage play into being a teacher? This is very scary times to be in education. I applaud you all. You are getting it from all fronts, all over the place. Unfortunately, this is not a relaxing or easy job. It just isn't. Like, this just isn't the work. It's like being a parent. And I bring up being a parent, that's why I do studies on mother work, because to me, parents and teachers and mothers and fathers should be natural allies, because the assumption should be that we all love these babies. That should be the assumption, and that's not always present, and the trust is not always present. And for those teachers who I've seen, and I know they exist in this district, principals, teachers, administrators, I've seen them in action. They have been the courageous ones who are fighting and are pushing to improve things, who will speak up when other people won't. Everybody's been in that meeting where somebody says something crazy and only one person speaks up, and then everybody else in the meeting go to that one person. Jaquetta, I'm so glad you said something, because I was thinking the same thing. Imagine what the impact would be is if everybody said something at the same meeting, if everybody was courageous enough to speak up. There's power in numbers. There's power in numbers. I'm going to close up. I had some other points, but we could talk more in the Q&A. I am not going to do this now, but we can talk about this a little bit in the Q&A. I do want to read. I saw that there was a math teacher here. I don't see where he is, that I heard the district had just gotten, who does like critical math education, right? And there's an article by Ye Martinez and Reze and Sherrod, which I can send to you all. And the lead author wrote a poem, Sarah Revsey, which I will read to you all. And it says, a love letter to radical math teachers. I see your lesson plan book, scrawled in red, black, and purple, whichever color best fits your mental state. Fatigued with eyes from two blue screens, the deluge of emails, confusion, and frustration, schedules and systems built upon the brokenness of the world, the failure to recognize each other's humanity. Somehow, you must navigate all of this. Somehow, you must subvert all of this. Always there is lack. Always there is more. Always there is compassion. Always the message. Give, give, give until you snap in two. Give, give, give until you collapse under the weight. But pause. Observe. Breathe. Reflect. And remember that in times of tumult, full of lashing winds, the trees that protect each other, that share, the trees that dance and weave, that bend in the eye of the storm, are the ones that do not break. Our interconnected roots whisper to us softly, I am because we are. We are because I am. A gentle reminder, a firm demand, do not forget to take care of you. Do not forget to take care of each other. This is love, and through love is how we win. Thank you very much.